You're watching The Legal Breakdown. So, Glenn, the right has seized on the fact that Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis admitted to having a relationship with another special prosecutor on the team, Nathan Wade, as if this is some exoneration now for Donald Trump. Correct me if I'm missing something, but how would a personal relationship between two prosecutors on the same prosecutorial team have any impact on Donald Trump or on the case?
It wouldn't. So I don't need to correct you. You're not wrong, Brian. If there are members of the same team, whether it's a prosecution team or a defense team, and those team members have a personal relationship, it has nothing to do with the rights of the defendant. So, it's not unlawful. It's not unethical. It does not represent any kind of conflict of interest. So, Trump and company will play this for all it's worth in the court of public opinion. But frankly, I don't see it having any impact on the rights of the defendant. There has been no allegation that a defendant has been prejudiced, that a defendant's due process rights have been violated somehow. So at the end of the day, legally speaking, this is going to be much ado about nothing in my opinion. Of course, it will get traction in the court of public opinion because, the MTGs of the world have already entered the fray and tried to refer Fani Willis, for ethical investigations and criminal investigations and all sorts of nonsense. But again, it doesn't impact the rights of Trump and his 18 criminal associates, co-defendants in the RICO prosecution. And I suspect in a couple of months, this will be in our rearview mirror, and we likely will have forgotten all about it.
Now, there's been reporting that Wade's firm was paid substantially more than other prosecutors, even though Fani Willis has said publicly that they were all paid the same rate. So what would account for the difference here, the disparity here?
Well, if everybody is hired at the same rate, some people may have more responsibilities than others. Some people may generate more, we don't usually call it billable hours because in public service, billable hours is not a thing. We kind of make one fixed salary when you're a government employee and you're prosecuting cases. Now, when you bring in a special counsel from outside government and you hire them, they may be required to keep their billable hours, submit their billable hours so that they get paid accordingly. And there was some earlier reporting that there were, I believe, 3 special counsel hired. They brought different skill sets to the team, and they were all paid, as you said, the same rate. That doesn't mean they have all been compensated the exact same amount if some worked on the case more and some worked on the case less.
Glenn, how would this have had an impact on Trump and his prosecution?
I'm hard pressed to see how it would impact a right of a defendant. So I don't want to come up with some wild hypothetical where, there is some conspiracy going on at the prosecutor's office to try to deprive one or more defendants of some right that they're entitled to under the law, some due process right. I'm really hard pressed to see how a relationship between 2 prosecutors on the same team working toward the same goal, or 2 defense attorneys on the same team working toward the same goal. We have seen criminal defense teams that consisted of husbands and wives. Nothing improper about that. So, I'm not even going to come up with some wild hypotheticals about how it might actually work to the prejudice of any defendant, because I don't think that's a fruitful discussion.
Well, you just alluded to this, the fact that there could be husband and wives on the same team. Is it unusual at all for a prosecutorial team to include people who are in a relationship in some way?
Yeah, so are workplace romances unusual? I would say not. In our common experience, there are people who develop workplace romances. They end up getting married. They can still work together as long as there's no conflict, as long as one doesn't owe some loyalty to, for example, a defendant that the prosecutor's office is involved in investigating or prosecuting. That could pose a conflict, but it's not at all unusual for people, on the same side of a particular cause or case to be involved in personal relationships.
Glenn, can you talk about the irony of Donald Trump, of all people, claiming that infidelity is disqualifying, even as the guy is currently awaiting trial in Manhattan for campaign finance violations to cover up an affair that he had with Stormy Daniels?
I mean, Donald Trump is the poster boy for infidelity.
Yeah.
When you look at some of his history, his background, it really is laughable. But here's the thing. Everything Donald Trump does is projection. He is in the process of accusing others of election interference. Why? Because they're trying to hold him accountable for his election crimes. But, Brian, he has not one, but two cases involving election interference that were scheduled to go to trial in March, right? The March 4 trial. Now that trial date has since fallen off the calendar and it's going to be pushed down the road a little bit. That is a federal election interference case. He's got another backup auxiliary criminal trial. He's got a total of 4 criminal trials pending against him. And that trial is set to begin on March 25th up in New York. People call that the falsifying business records case, the hush money payments case. No, that's an election interference case because he made hush money payments and then falsified the records attendant to those hush money payments because he was trying to hide, to conceal from the American voters his unsuitability to be president. That is an election interference case.
Now, Glenn, let's finish off with this. Now that the March 4th trial in Washington, D.C. has fallen off the calendar as we await a decision by both the D.C. Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court on the question of presidential immunity, how does that impact this case, this ongoing RICO prosecution in Fulton County, Georgia?
Yeah, so we don't yet have a firm trial date in Fani Willis's RICO prosecution in Georgia. Some time ago, she suggested to the presiding judge, Judge McAfee, an August 5th trial date. But as far as I can tell, there has been no hard trial date set yet. There are so many moving pieces with respect to Donald Trump's trial dance card. As we say, the March 4 trial just fell off the calendar. He's got a March 25th criminal prosecution up in New York. He's got a May 20th criminal prosecution in Florida. He potentially may have an August trial date, the RICO prosecution down in Georgia. And here is the thing that we should not lose sight of. Right now, the March 4 trial date dropped off the calendar. But as soon as the appellate court rejects, and they will, Donald Trump's ridiculous absolute presidential immunity claim, and then we wait to see whether the Supreme Court will accept it for review or not. Once that case is back on a trial track, some of these other cases, the trial dates will have sorted themselves out, will have become more clear. And what Judge Chutkan is going to be able to do is look at the daylight that has opened up in Donald Trump's calendar, and she's going to be able to drop what was the March 4 trial date right onto his calendar when it opens up. That could end up being, May or June or July. We don't know until some of these other trials sort of become a little bit more clear. But listen, Donald Trump still has 4 pending criminal prosecutions against him. And I remain confident, Brian, that at least one of those cases will be tried to fruition. There will likely be a guilty verdict because the evidence across all 4 of these cases is extremely strong. I would argue irrefutable. And Donald Trump has no defense. He's got nothing but lies, which he spouts all day in the court of public opinion. Those lies will not see the light of day inside a courtroom. So I still am fairly confident we're going to get at least one trial litigated through to verdict and sentencing well in advance of the November 2024 presidential election.
All right, well, we'll obviously stay on top of all of these prosecutions that Donald Trump is contending with. And thank you for rebutting yet another barrage of disinformation from the right as it relates to Fani Willis and her relationship with a prosecutor on her own prosecutorial team. So again, for anybody watching, if you want to stay on top of everything that's happening right now, please make sure to subscribe. The links to both of our channels are right here on this screen. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
And I'm Glenn Kirshner.
You're watching The Legal Breakdown.